Kia ora to the staff of DSL. My name's Tracy Larson and I am the Waikato Health and Wellness Facilitator for an organisation called Complex Chronic Illness Support. Now this is a very broad term and we get referrals from a lot of different people with a lot of different health conditions, but ultimately we do support those with ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, POTS and now long COVID. I'll discuss that a little bit in a minute. Complex Chronic Illness Support is an organisation that is based in the Bay of Plenty. I have been working with this client group for the last 10 years under the umbrella of MS Waikato, but we joined forces with Complex Chronic Illness Support, or easier said is CCIS, in 2021. So in a nutshell, the services that we provide is an information and education around the conditions and symptom management strategies. And we do that through a variety of means. We have one-on-one facilitation support where we do an assessment and work with the client in what their greatest needs are and support them with providing information according to their needs. We do monthly members meetings, which is usually topic focused. As well as monthly social group meetings. We do those online as well as in person in our different regions. We have a great closed Facebook group community, which is very supportive and validating for a lot of our people. And we have a great bi-monthly newsletter as well. So what else do we do? Low-grade advocacy support. You may see me from time to time supporting our clients through your assessments. We do support with WINS and with GPs as well. So the conditions that we support are myalgic encephalomyelitis, which is a real mouthful. It took me probably about 6 months to get my mouth around that. More commonly known as ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. It's been known by several names over the years, but globally, ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, or just chronic fatigue syndrome, seems to be the name that most people can relate to and understand. Fibromyalgia is also another condition we support, and a lot of our clients have both. Fibromyalgia is actually considered a subgroup of ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, or a comorbidity. We also support long COVID now because the trigger for ME, chronic fatigue is often a viral condition that people just never get better from. So naturally we now support those with long COVID as well. And dysautonomia, there's something like 11 different types of dysautonomia, but we do only support 3, which is the POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is very typical for our ME community to experience, neural mediated hypertension, and orthostatic intolerance. So what is ME, chronic fatigue syndrome? It is a complex, debilitating illness that causes immune, neurological, and endocrine dysfunction. So with those 3 systems, are 3 big systems in the body that are impacted, you can see why the whole system, the whole body becomes impacted and why it can become so complex. Fibromyalgia is the central nervous system and how it interprets pain abnormally, causing pain to be magnified. Now, these 2 conditions often go hand in hand. Many of our people are diagnosed with both of these conditions, and really the only, in a real simplistic form, the only difference really is that ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, is a dysfunction with energy production, but it has a pain element to it as well. Fibromyalgia is a pain disorder, but it also has a fatigue element as well. So the 2 do get married together often. We do tend to lump the 2 of them together a lot, although they are 2 standalone conditions. But what joins them also together is that there's a myriad of other symptoms that both of these conditions also experience, which I'll talk about soon. Now, long COVID, that is a continuous chronic neuroinflammatory immune response 3 months post COVID-19 infection. Once we get to about 6 months down the track where there's been no improvement, it then becomes long COVID-induced ME chronic fatigue syndrome. It can actually be reclassified as that or re-diagnosed as that. Long COVID is typically a virus that where people don't become better, although we are starting to see some clients come through at the moment who, following their COVID-19 infection, became well again and went back to work for a month or two, and then a stressful trigger of some kind meant that they came down with these symptoms again, and they flared up again, and as well as some other really random, strange symptoms. Typically, we do see the fatigue element, the pain element, but also the respiratory issue, and brain fog is really a big factor for our long COVID community as well. So the standard sort of diagnostic criteria for ME chronic fatigue syndrome and also long COVID is that they need to have unexplained fatigue resulting in substantial reduction or impairment in the ability to engage in pre-illness level of activity for at least 6 months. They need to have unrefreshing sleep and sleep difficulties. Often we see our people with insomnia issues. And the key signature, the identifying symptom that sort of makes this condition stand out from any other fatigue-related conditions is the post-exertion malaise, which I'll talk to a little bit to soon. And now they need that as well as one of the others, which is either cognitive impairment, so like a brain fog, or orthostatic intolerance. Now, typically, most of our people have all of these. It's not very often they have just brain fog or just orthostatic intolerance, but they typically have both. Now, there is a difference between ME chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic fatigue. So when people approach us and say they've got chronic fatigue, a lot of people find ME chronic fatigue syndrome quite a mouthful to say. So we do often abbreviate it down to the same chronic fatigue, but there is actually a distinct difference. And that is, it's important to know the difference because of the treatment options that are available and what you apply to what. So fatigue is a sickness behaviour that applies to just about every illness and disease out there, and it's just the body making us go to bed for a while to rest up because our body won't heal unless we're resting. So fatigue is a real requirement of the body that the body creates. So when you've got chronic fatigue as a result of mental health, for an example, then exercise is a really good thing to do to help stimulate your energy and to make you feel better. But with ME chronic fatigue syndrome, that is just the biggest no-no because that pushes people beyond the energy envelope, which causes post-exertion malaise. So we are always making sure that we have a distinct understanding with our clients between the difference between chronic fatigue syndrome and just chronic fatigue that could be related to other conditions, because we don't want to be insisting people go out and increase their activity and go and do some exercise if it's going to make them feel worse and make their symptoms flare. And just a quick word about depression and anxiety as well. Depression does not cause ME chronic fatigue syndrome, but it is often diagnosed in error, especially because people have to have that 6-month time frame of unexplained fatigue. Then depression is often first diagnosed as a start point, which then the doctors say, well, you know, go and do a bit more exercise and get a bit more active, which is the worst thing that can happen. But anxiety also can really flare symptoms. So we're always strongly recommending people to make sure that their anxiety and depression is well managed, because both of them will exacerbate symptoms. But again, depression does not cause ME chronic fatigue syndrome, and we can't, and it's difficult to apply the theory around we'll go and do some more activity and exercise to help with your depression, because that will cause post-exertion malaise. You can't exercise your way out of ME chronic fatigue syndrome. So here is a list of the most common symptoms that we see that are typical for ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, fibro, and also the long COVID. But by no means is this an exhaustive list. Those are just the most common that we see. So yes, debilitating fatigue and post-exertion malaise. I'll speak to post-exertion malaise a bit more in a minute. Nasal sinus and sinus issues and flu-like symptoms. Because the throat area, ears, nose, throat area is the first line of defense for our immune system, and when we go into a stress response by pushing ourselves beyond our energy envelope, that causes an immune response. So that is often a first sign that people are starting to near their energy envelope. But we see a lot of people with swollen glands and sore throats, and no matter how many antibiotics they throw at it, that does not clear it up. So that's really common. Unrefreshing sleep and sleep disturbances. There's research that shows that people with ME chronic fatigue don't seem to get into those deep stage 4 levels of sleep. They seem to skirt around the sort of more shallower levels of sleep. And if they do get down to the deep levels of sleep, they're only there for perhaps a couple of cycles as opposed to a good 4 or 5 cycles throughout the night. So this causes sleep dysfunction, and as we all know how well we survive after a few nights of bad sleep, when these guys are going months and months and months with bad sleep. There is sort of the condition can be broken down into 3 stages, and the middle stage, obviously the crash stage, is the first stage when they just do excessive sleeping. They can be sleeping 18, 20 hours a day. And then in the middle stage, there's this, they can get to that tired but wide stage, which is where they can be quite sleepy all day, and then they can fire up and sort of become quite alive at night, and so it makes it really difficult to get to sleep at night. So we often see sleep patterns completely reversed, which makes it really difficult to get back to normal day-night sleeping. Yeah, and so sleep is a real troublesome symptom that we find is quite difficult to work with at times. Muscle and joint pain and weakness, we find that that's very typical for both or all conditions. And weakness can come and go depending on their level of energy at the time. Photophobia and sensitivities to light, sound and touch, as well as your temperature irregulations. The autonomic nervous system is really malfunctioned. So anything that's related to that sort of becomes so super sensitive that I see people with sunglasses on inside with the curtains pulled as well, or they never leave the house. They've always got sunglasses on, and earmuffs whenever they go outside as well. For some of our people, going out to a cafe is just a nightmare, with the sound of the coffee machine, the music that they're playing, all the individual conversations going on, chairs scraping away on concrete floors. The sound is just so overwhelming, it can make them really sick. So some people have to be very picky and choosy about when they head out to a cafe. And yes, I've known some people that I've never seen their full face because I've always had these big glasses on and these big earmuffs on and their hats and scarves on. And I've known someone who looked like that for about 6 years before I actually saw her whole face, which was it was a lovely surprise to see. Gastro issues and intolerances, again, the digestive issues and gut issues and gut health is always really impacted. And when you think about it, in a stress response, every bodily system is on fire and going to help us run or fight. Now, there are 2 or 3 systems of the body that basically get suppressed when there's a stress response going on, and the digestive system is one of them. Now, we're living in an environment now, or in society, where so many people are in a constant state of chronic stress. So this does not surprise me that we see so many digestive and gut issues going on throughout society. But our clients do often have a lot of reflux, a lot of IBS, a lot of diverticulitis. We see some Crohn's disease come through, celiac disease, a lot of those kind of issues. So that's really typical, and another layer of issues that they have to manage. Increased sensitivities to allergies, that kind of goes with all the autonomic stuff as well. And then the cognitive functioning and the brain fog. A lot of our people talk about how debilitating the brain fog can be. And if anything, that's probably the most debilitating symptom, because this really stops. It becomes a real barrier to social engagement. And they struggle to have a conversation that lasts more than 5 minutes without losing their train of thought, without having difficulty with word recall, and like that word's on the top of their tongue, or they swap words around. And a lot of people just report that they just feel absolutely stupid. And that really impacts their self-esteem when they're out, especially when they're at the bank or at the lawyer and they're having to process all this technical jargon, and it just becomes quite overwhelming for them. And most GP appointments are 15 minutes, and there's usually a lot to discuss, and they get in there and they just find it really difficult to express themselves and string their words together, because that brain fog is just so debilitating. So yeah, it's a real troublesome symptom. And so, as I say, this is by no means an exhaustive list, but these are the most common that we see. So finally, a word about post-exertion malaise. Now, post-exertion malaise is when people have pushed beyond the energy envelope, and they crash, or they have a flare in symptoms, and they can become very, very sick and very unwell. Now, research has shown that there's a dysfunction at the mitochondria level. So it means that the body just cannot restore the energy that's used on a day-to-day basis quickly. Now, I usually forget to talk about stuff, so I'm actually going to read from my notes on this one. So typically the body functions on an energy consumption and production system. When energy is expended in an equal amount or greater amount of restoration is needed to return to baseline functioning. Each day this energy balance must be restored for the body to function and perform properly. And that's just for you and me and every healthy Joe blogs out there. However, in ME chronic fatigue syndrome, when the cellular energy expenditure exceeds the body's ability to produce energy, the result is a drastic reduction in functional capacity, which has not been present prior to disease onset. The physiological phenomenon is known as post-exertion malaise, which represents a temporary worsening of symptoms we have just discussed, and to some degree the energy until some degree of energy is restored. The onset of post-exertion malaise is often delayed, and this can be anywhere between 12 and 72 hours after the exertion. And I put that down to for a lot of our people, when they're nearing the edge of the envelope and they've got something really pressing that they needed to be attending to, like going to a doctor's appointment or bank or hospital appointments and things like that, that they push through, and then an adrenaline surge kicks in. So that takes a little while, a day or two, for that to wear off before they really crash. So that's why we see that delay. Periods of prolonged and severe post-exertion malaise are referred to as a crash, which can vary from person to person and episode to episode. Some may be mild, resulting in the inability to carry on with daily activities such as cognitive processing or physical tasks. Others can be so severely debilitating it becomes life-threatening due to the individual's inability to walk, talk, eat, drink, or sit upright. Once in a crash, the individual must allow their body to recover before resuming activities. It is critical to allow restoration and to avoid the repetitive push-crash cycle, as repeated crashes will threaten an individual's ability to return to their former baseline functioning and will hinder the recovery process. So you can kind of consider it like a broken leg. When you've got a broken, if you keep walking on that broken leg, it ain't going to get better. So same thing with this. The energy production ability, the ability to produce energy is not going to improve unless our people rest. So this is what we're always trying to educate to them. And so they may have rested for a while, for a few days, and they're just starting to come out of that and come back to their baseline. And a lot of our people go, oh, they wake up one day and they're feeling quite good. And it's like, yippee, I'm feeling quite good today. Oh gosh, I haven't done all these other chores for about 2 weeks. So, oh, I'm going to go and mow the lawns and do the vacuuming and catch up on some washing. And then they just overexert themselves again and they crash back into it. So they get this real push crash cycle going on. So a lot of what we do is educate our people around, instead of this with the energy, but let's just sort of get more of this going on. So that's what we educate them around. So the different activities that can cause post-exertion malaise are physical activity, cognitive activity, emotional activity, like any emotional upsets and things like that can be, or over that sense of overwhelm, orthostatic, so if they're standing upright for too long, and also that environmental and sensory stimuli that becomes overwhelming. Just check my notes, make sure I haven't missed anything. No, that's all good. So hopefully you've got a good understanding of what post-exertion malaise is and why it's caused, and why exercise and pushing beyond your energy envelope is just such a bad thing for this community. And we've grown up in a society, there's that ad on TV, the Coldrell ad, just take a pill and soldier on, and it's just like, oh, no. We need to learn to really recognize our symptoms or those little feelings within our body to know that, hey, we are tiring. We just need to rest up for a while. But it takes a lot to re-educate society and our lifestyle to make these changes. So I'm just going to go really quickly through the key management strategies that we educate our people around. Pacing. Pacing is the key management strategy, and that is pacing between physical activity and cognitive activity, and rest and routine. And pacing also includes planning and prioritizing. So yeah, we did lots of education around this. Pacing can also mean only vacuuming one room, not the whole house this week. It might mean just cleaning the bathrooms this week and nothing else, or it might mean just today we're doing focusing on washing. So yeah, so it's breaking up activity. It's also switching different types of tasks, and it's also doing activity and then breaking up activity with rest. So planning is really important. We offer them a weekly planner, so if they've got any appointments that they've got to go out for during the week, then to sort of clear the day before and after, so they can just rest, so they can rest sort of to grow some energy, so that it'll get them through the activity they need to go out for, and then they've got a clear slate on the diary, so they've got no pressing engagement, so they can just rest afterwards. And also prioritising. I'll talk a little bit more about prioritising soon. We also talk about energy preserving strategies, and we talk about the pebbles in the jar and how they start the day with a jar full of pebbles, and every activity they do, there goes out a pebble. Like the first activity is just sitting upright and swinging their legs out of the bed. There's one pebble. The other one might be, standing up and walking to the toilet. The next one's getting dressed, or perhaps it might be a shower today, so then to have a shower. In fact, a shower seems to take a lot of pebbles. That might be 3 or 4 pebbles. Oh, today they might decide to wash their hair, so there's probably another 3 or 4 pebbles. Then they're going to dry their hair, then they've got to dry themselves, and they've got to get themselves dressed. And all this before breakfast. All this before they've even made the bed or walked anywhere, gone out to get the letters, the newspaper out of the letterbox. So we talked about people about how they can spread those pebbles across the day. You may have also heard the spoon theory, same concept around pebbles, spoons. And also we talk a lot about, you're not going to be able to make that phone call with a flat battery on your phone, or you're not going to be able to drive that car an extra kilometre with an empty tank of gas. So trying to educate people that we do have a limited amount of energy. For some reason, the human race seems to think that we can just soldier on, soldier on, soldier on, and that we'll never run out of energy, but it's just not the case. So energy preserving strategies, and just having them to understand that they've got $100 a day to spend on energy. Let's only spend $80 a day, and let's carry over $20 to the next day. So yeah, we've got all these different analogies that we can use to help people understand energy expenditure and also energy preservation. Energy preservation, we often recommend an OT referral, and I do believe that you guys can do a referral to an OT. An OT referral will be really great because if they can get a perching stool so they can sit at the bench to do any chores in the home, sitting down is great as a way of preserving energy, and also a shower stool and a trolley that they can push around the house. They can load up the trolley to move things around the house so they're not taking multiple trips up and down. Those are three, and a walker that they can use inside the house and outside of the house. They're four fantastic pieces of equipment that that all our people had. So if you do see any of our people, I do encourage you to put that OT referral through for some equipment. We also talk about a lot around sleep hygiene and getting the routines leading up to sleep to try and get those practices in place to bring restoration and relaxation to the body so that their body knows and is realizing, we're getting ready, we're preparing ourselves for sleep so that hopefully they can get to sleep sooner than lying awake all night. And stress management strategies, super important to get that body out of the sympathetic nervous response back to that parasympathetic nervous response. That's the rest and digest response. That's where healing happens. So we can't heal unless we are regularly getting into that parasympathetic nervous state. So we talk a lot about stress management, relaxation strategies. Annabelle, my colleague in Tauranga, she is a yoga instructor and she's got some awesome videos on our website around yoga and around breathing and restorative movement, which a lot of our clients find really fantastic as well. And when we are talking restorative movement and any sort of form of gentle exercise, or when people have got to that point where they're sort of at that third stage of the illness where they've got everything really well balanced and they can do the same thing every day without causing post-exertion malaise, they're at that stage now that they can start to just sort of bounce the boundaries a little bit to start to increase their activity level. Now we encourage that to be done in baby steps. Not going too hard too fast. For an example, if they can walk for 5 minutes, we don't suddenly say go and walk for 10 minutes because that's 100% increase. We go, let's walk for another minute. Let's just do 10% increases at a time. And so when we are starting to suggest that they can start to sort of incorporate some gentle exercise into their day, we often use the 1 and 3 rule. So do one set of repeats for a minute and then have a 3-minute break, or do it for 30 seconds and have a 3-minute break. So encouraging less exercise, but lots of sort of rest breaks between the exercise. Counselling and psychological support is really important because depression does walk beside our people from time to time through their health journey. There's just no two ways about that. So psychological support to help them through depression and to help them with mindset and things like that can be really beneficial, but it's not the cure. There was a time when the PACE program, the PACE research suggested that CBT and graded exercise therapy was the cure for ME, chronic fatigue syndrome. Well, that research has now been well and truly debunked. Yes, they still have their place as a supporting approach and treatment, but not a treatment approach that is going to bring a cure. Graded exercise therapy, again, it's at the end stage of the illness when we can start to bounce boundaries ever so gently. Hence why I put that line through there, because no, it's not a cure. No, you don't prescribe it at the early stages or even at the wide and tired stage. It's more at end stage when they can start to bounce their boundaries. So a little about prioritising. Now, a lot of our people, their energy envelopes is small. They have a very small energy envelope and they have to prioritise a lot. They have to prioritise and make decisions all the time about what they're going to spend that very small amount of energy on for the day. What is most important? And sadly, showering is one of the things that gets sort of put down the priority list more and more often. They often have to make that decision. Is it going to be a shower today or am I going to make a meal? should I have a shower today, or should I tackle that week's worth of dishes that's been building up and building up? Should I have a shower today, or should I put some washing on? I really need to probably change the bed on my sheets on my bed. They've been on there for a month. So maybe I should be, changing those instead. Oh goodness, I've got a GP appointment today. I haven't had a shower for 3 or 4 days, but I can't do both today, so I'm just going to go to the GP appointment smelly. They need to make a phone call to work. I'm definitely not going to have a shower on that day, because that's one of the most stressful things you can do, and the stress factor will just wipe them out. So no, shower's definitely not on that day. Or is it, am I going to have a shower today, or am I going to vacuum the house? So they're constantly trying to weigh up what is best to spend the energy on. I had a client the other day mention to me that we were talking about exactly this, and she said to me, and she said it so beautifully, I thought I'd add it into this PowerPoint, that she said, Tracy, there's no energy left after you've done those few little things each day. There's no energy left to feed the spirit. And it was so sad how she said it, but it's so true. It's what we see a lot of our people. Hence why we see so much depression, is because life becomes purely about just functioning. There's nothing else that they can take on board, nothing else that they consider. It's just functioning to attend to those most basic survival tasks that they need to do for a lot of our people. So yeah, I just really wanted to bring this to your attention, because with the need for hands-on showering as your criteria, a lot of our people, yes, could do with a shower stool. If they had someone in there helping them wash their hair, helping them dry themselves, helping them get dressed, that would make such a difference to these people. So yeah, really important to keep in mind that how they have to prioritize when you are doing an assessment with our people. So as you can imagine, when their lives become so reduced down to just surviving and attending to those most basic of tasks, that there's a lot of loss experience and a lot of grief experience as well that comes with it. Usually what we notice is the first thing to go are social connections and friendships. At this stage, people are still struggling to try and keep their jobs. And so they only have energy to do that. They get home and they crash, they sleep all weekend just so they can work. And as they're continuously pushing through that push crash cycle, and their health is just getting worse and worse and worse and worse, in time they just no longer can commit to any sort of social engagements. So they lose a lot of friendships. And in time, when they start having to lose their jobs, they lose that sense of career, they lose their income. That really impacts on relationships, and we see a lot of relationship breakup as well. Then we see the next usual step in the process is that then they have to go off to WINS, which in itself can be such a humiliating process, and very degrading, and a real loss of sense of dignity and self-esteem when you're having to be confronted with that system, because it is so overwhelming and stressful. And then they find themselves just plunged into poverty, and they can't even afford to buy those supplements, or they can't afford, some really lovely, good, healthy food to manage their health, their gut issues. And so it just has these constant layers of loss and constant layers of struggle. And if they did luckily have some savings, and often they have to use all their savings up in order to manage, because the benefit just doesn't stretch far enough, and they start digging into their retirement funds. So the lack of energy that they have just means that their ability to process the grief that they experience just becomes too difficult. And then next minute we see that another layer, which is ingrained trauma. So it's really sad to see. And I think this is why we see this condition turn into such a long-term condition, because of the layers and layers and layers of stress and trauma and grief and loss of dignity, loss of self-esteem, loss of confidence, and they have to basically rebuild themselves from the ground up again. And because lifestyle habits and lifestyle habits and practices are so ingrained. To actually make change in your lifestyle habits to healthy habits can take a long time to also turn the ship around, so to speak. So, so this is why it becomes a long-term chronic health and a long-term chronic condition. So what can you do? If you are doing an assessment with any of our community, then what I do recommend you do is to check in with them to see how long that they can cope to have a conversation for. You may have to break up your assessment into several different appointment times so that they can have rest in between. Also notice, remember, and previously we talked about brain fog and we talked about word recall and the ability to sort of string their words together. That can often be a real key thing to notice. So if you start seeing this start to happen, that can be a time that you can suggest, hey, I can see that you're starting to struggle. How about we stop for today and reschedule the rest of the appointment? So just sort of be mindful of those cues that you might notice. Their memory is generally pretty shocking, and everything goes in and straight out again. So what I typically do is after every interaction, I send them an email bullet pointing the key points of our conversation, so they've always got a reference point to refer back to remember the conversation, especially if there's anything that they need to attend to. So that's something you could do. If that's too difficult though, just to write on a piece of paper while you're there some key things and leave that piece of paper with them. Give them time to answer as well. You know, sometimes they can struggle to sort of put their thoughts together to express and to be heard. So we often hear that people just feel that they don't get the opportunity to express themselves because people preempt what they're trying to say, and that because they just don't give them the time to get their words out. So just give them the time to answer. When you're setting goals, just be really mindful that that can be really overwhelming for our people. When we don't set goals typically, but we give ideas and suggestions that they could try. And then the next time round, I always check in to see if they've got any challenges or issues with the ideas that we've shared, as opposed to labeling them, hey, let's for the next month you try doing this, because they just get overwhelmed with it. They struggle with the guilt and the shame that they are never able to commit to anything, or that they become very unreliable. And so then when there's a goal in front of them that they've got to try and work towards and to commit to, it just really becomes overwhelming for them and can set them back considerably in any progress that they've made. We also find that when people are in an adrenaline surge, their talking can just go 90 miles an hour. They can start to babble, and they can veer off in all different types of tangents. They've got so much information that they feel like they want to share because they've never been heard, that they feel the need to sort of share every detail. So if you find that they're going off on a tangent, just gently bring them back to focus on the topic at task. And also I've just got there too, OT referral. If you're able to do an OT referral, that would be awesome for them, for those equipment for inside the house. Well, that's me. I've come to an end, but I've just realised there's a couple of little key bits of information that I've missed, and that is that ME, chronic fatigue, fibro, long COVID, it's not fussy. They're not fussy conditions, so there's no particular culture that it targets, there's no particular age that it targets, there's no particular gender that it targets. It's all people right across the board. There's no barriers. So we see people on our books from children as young as 7 and 8 right through to 65, 75, 80. Typically, most of the people on our books are probably 18 to 65. We have majority of women. We do find that there is more women than men that do have this condition. these conditions, but men are still not exempt. They're definitely still prone to this. And we're also now starting to see if mum or dad have had ME, chronic fatigue or fibro, that we're starting to actually now start to see the kids come through. So it's starting to become a familial condition as well, with a hereditary element also. So yes, if you ever come across anybody in your travels that have ME, chronic fatigue syndrome, and they're not currently with us, then you can refer to them to us. I see that my little my little face there is covering some of my email address, but it's just .org.nz at the bottom there. So Google our website. You can yourself can refer to us as being a health professional, or the clients can self-refer. So jump onto our website and just look under the Help for Me tab, and that will take you to electronic forms to complete, and that will connect those people with us, and we'll take it from there. So, so I really want to thank you so much for this time today. I've been really enjoyed sharing this information with you. And if you have any questions or concerns, please do not hesitate to be in touch. Bye for now.